Comment today. We're so glad you're here. Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting bereaved parents. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. Sorry, I was watching. HPH goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non-dogmatic way. HPH affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non-religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at all HPH meetings is voluntary. All discussions that take place at affiliate-led meetings are confidential. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Zoom meetings run by the HPH leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of HPH meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with children who have passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members. So we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, I'm going to read Alicia's bio quickly, and then we will get started. Alicia Young is an award-winning author, journalist, and speaker who has lived in 8 countries. She is not on the run. She does cross-cultural consultation, media and publicity, public speaking, and writes books. The past 2 have been about spiritual topics, which she considered a risky career move. About Divinely Align Me, Signs from the Universe. Every day, the universe is sending signs to you, signs to soothe heartache and stress, signs to guide you with important decisions and ease doubts, signs to soften loneliness and dissolve fear, signs from your loved ones in spirit, signs from your cherished pets who have crossed the rainbow bridge. In Divinely Align Me, Alicia shares more than 150 true stories from people like you who have received compelling signs from the universe. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be able to join you today.
We're delighted to have you. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? And I know that you talked about living in the in-between. Maybe explain that a little bit.
Certainly, Carol. I do. I often say that I live in the in-between because when I look at the different hats that I wear in my life, I'm sort of straddling 2 different areas oftentimes. For example, 2 cultures. I grew up in Australia, which is a Western modern country, but my family actually comes from India, and we always grew up feeling that push-pull of 2 different cultures. I've been exposed to 2 faiths. I was raised as a Christian, as a garden variety Catholic, as I often say, with an off-ramp to Hinduism, which I think in retrospect made me open to the idea of things like past lives, samsara, which we call the cycle of rebirth. So I grew up with different reference points. My family enjoyed vastly different lifestyles in each country. In India, my family had domestic staff, which millions of people do in India. It's nothing to write home about. They came out to Australia, my parents, to give the 9 children a better start in life. And so my parents went from having domestic staff and having things done for them to my father becoming a janitor, eventually a custodial staff. And my mother worked in a large hospital kitchen. So they had markedly different lives. And even the idea of motherhood, which is normally pretty straightforward, right? You're a mother or you're not, played out with duality in my life. My husband and I chose not to have children, but I ended up being an egg donor to two couples, both good friends, who were struggling with infertility. So I have two biological children, Rachel, who is, gosh, almost 25, and Sam, who is 20. And so I'm a mother in the biological sense, but not in the other sense. I feel like those children have, one mother. So I feel like it's given me a passport into multiple worlds, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. Thank you for that. In your book, A Visit from Heaven, you have an experience with a little boy, Bobby. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and his mom, Jane?
Certainly. Jane was a girl I grew up with. We've known each other for decades. We always say that we shared the adventures of childhood and the giddiness of adolescence with the crushes and the boy bands and all the stuff that girls do. And we were very close. And then after school, we sort of drifted a little bit. There was not any kind of falling out. Life took us in different directions. And then years later, we had a so-called bumping into each other, a chance meeting. And in catching up, I knew that Jane had twins, a girl and a boy. What I didn't know was that she had lost her baby boy, Bobby, at around 5 months into her pregnancy. And of course, when something like that happens, when someone shares that kind of loss, you want to support them in any way you can, but at the same time, there's really nothing that you can say or do that would ease that kind of heartache. It was a few months later that I had an experience in which I believe I met Bobby. I met Jane's son, who had in the end just not been born. And I was simply a go-between. I was nothing more than a go-between. I had a message from Bobby to Jane, and he gave me this experience to meet him and gave me a little bit of a tour of the afterlife to get that message to his grieving mother.
Could you explain a little bit about how it all happened?
Sure. We were living in Houston, John and I, and we just moved into a new apartment. I was surrounded by cardboard boxes and all the rest of it. And I'd been at it for a while, and I took a break on the sofa. And I just took a break with a coffee and things to read. And I was reading when I looked up, and suddenly I was somewhere else. Now, please let me clarify, this was not a near-death experience. My life was not in danger at any point. But I just looked up and I found myself on a beach. And the only way I can really explain that is, imagine for a moment that you have taken a cross-country train trip and you start on one side of the country and you're immersed in a book, and you look up and you realize that your scenery has changed. It's like, oh, we're in the country now. That was my feeling. There was no fear around it. I simply found myself on a beach. To one side was just this beautiful sunset of pinks and oranges. On the other side were sand dunes with a kind of a flat, creamy background. When I took this in, logic kicked in. As I mentioned, I've been an egg donor, and it left me with a skin condition, a pretty mild one, called chloasma, which is hyperpigmentation. And every day I have a hat or sunscreen or a parasol surgically attached to me because I have to avoid the sun. So when I'm on the beach, logic kicked in. And I went, oh, I'm on the beach. I need a hat. As I thought that, I felt a little tug on my tunic. And I saw a little boy of 4 or 5 years old just smiling up at me so beautifully. And he said, don't worry, we don't have chloasma here. Like, we don't have hyperpigmentation. And I laughed and I said, that's a very big word for a little boy. And I met Bobby, and in that moment I just knew. It was just a quiet knowing that he was Jane's son. And again I said, this is such a big word for a little boy. And he said to me, what age would you prefer I be? And he changed in front of me. He was a little boy of 4 or 5. He became an older child. He became a lanky teenager. a grown man. And finally, he showed me himself as an old man with a beard. Nothing was said in the way that we speak. This was all thought. But somehow he knew he wanted the little boy. I wanted the little boy back. And so he became that little 4 or 5-year-old again. And of course, it's something I will never forget. And the whole point of it was to give a message to Jane, who he said, my mother, I love her so much. I wasn't, she miscarried. I chose not to come in the end. So she had to miscarry and endure that heartache. But because of her intense grief, her understandable grief, she is not receiving the signs that I am sending her. And again, I was no more than a go-between to deliver that message.
Well, that's beautiful. And it's wonderful that you just knew it was him. I'm a huge believer in the soul plan that has provided me through my journey a lot of comfort. I know that you talk about the soul plan. Tell us about Bobby's soul plan.
What I saw very briefly was that the sunset, Bobby showed me some past lives with his current day parents, Jane and Joe. And then I looked across to my side to where the beach had been, and the beach was replaced by a white room, which was white walls and white room and people in white tunics, but it didn't hurt my eyes to look at it. I saw people sitting in circles, rows of circles, with Bobby standing in the center, now kind of a young adult, but still clearly who he was. And what I realized was that I was allowed to observe one of his soul plan sessions. It was not the first time this had happened, but there was also no rush to design his upcoming life. What I also saw was spirits and guides who were there to lovingly guide him through the design for his upcoming life, his soul plan. And so one of the guides, I call angels as well, said to them, well, let's recap what you're doing. Let's bring up your parents. And when he said that, a man and a woman from the group stood up, came forward, and held hands and smiled. There seemed to be a sense of knowing from these people, and they stood in the center. And what I then saw was conversations between Bobby and the parents, the Jane and Joe that he'd chosen to be his parents this time round. And they were going through Bobby's soul plan. And at the crux of Bobby's plan this time was a combination of physical and intellectual challenges that would, of course, impact them as his parents if he was to proceed with that. So I saw that he chose his parents for the qualities they already had from past lives that they would bring forward, that their different plans or life themes would dovetail together beautifully. And I just saw how he chose them. I saw free will. I saw how they chose each other, that at one point the angel said to Jane, to Bobby's mother, what he's choosing is very complex. If he is born, you will have a child with a lot of disabilities that will fall on you as his mother to deal with. But if he chooses not to be born this time round, you will suffer the heartache, the deep heartache of a miscarriage. And she said, I will take on this risk. I will take on this risk because doing so gives him the opportunity to come at all. And this happened years ago, this experience, but it still stays with me because it's the ultimate in selflessness that she said, I agree to be your mother, even though you are planning this incredibly complex and heartbreaking journey. I will be there because I'll be there to love you and to guide you and to be a fiercely loving advocate. And it still resonates so strongly that her complete selflessness in being aware of this possibility that he was designing for himself. So I was in genuine awe, and I remain in genuine awe of that.
So, do they have other children, Jane? Did he have siblings? What was the birth order?
Yes, Jane already had twins, a girl and a boy, when before her pregnancy with Bobby. And at one point in the middle of this, when they're all sitting around in their circles, someone stood up, and I instantly recognized him as Elliot, who is Bobby's present day brother. And he stood up and he said something that really surprised me. He said, "Let me be born first." And again, I'm sorry, it still makes my soul sore to hear what he said. He stood up and he said, given that Bobby was planning this life of physical and intellectual disability, of having a lot of special needs, he volunteered. He said, "Let me be born first. I will be your fierce protector. I will be your fierce protector. I will allow no one to bully you." And so it just again struck at my heart that everything is so nuanced, so layered, that he said by coming first, he would be there to help Bobby on his journey. That was Elliot. Elliot was one of the twins. The twin sister was also planning to come at that time, and she had designed within her life themes to experience jealousy that this special needs baby would get in her child's mind, would get all of mum and dad's attention and energy. And so she would have the opportunity to grow from that. Having a sibling with special needs, she might feel in the background at times. She might feel that her needs or her identity was somewhat in the background, and she would be gifted the opportunity to grow from that, and to stretch and grow emotionally and spiritually, to find herself perhaps in other ways, because the family was centered around this child with special needs. So it's all very layered. I'd never really thought about that before, that we choose not just only our siblings, but that we choose our birth order. Because when you think about it, for all of us who have siblings, we're never just a sister or a brother. We're an older sister, a little brother, and that brings in its own dynamics to our relationships as well.
Well, thank you for that. I always believe we have a soul family. I call it our soul group. I know that you refer to it as a soul crew. So do you believe that we all, kind of rally around and choose to come here for different roles to support each other in these challenges?
Very much. They often talk with soul groups, and of course, this is just not me. There are many spiritual authors I respect, who will often say a soul group can be anywhere from dozens of people to several hundred souls who play out these different roles through each lifetime, testing out different themes. For example, a life theme, if you like, is the overarching college major, the lesson that you really want to learn this time around. And oftentimes we will choose a primary life theme and a secondary life theme to almost chafe against each other a little bit, again, for growth. And all of this is done not for the suffering it entails, but for the spiritual growth it affords. For example, two souls might make an agreement this time around for one to be a patient and one to be a carer. So maybe the child has special needs like Bobby, and the mother might be the carer. And in the next life, they might choose to reverse that so that each understands, for example, the powerlessness that one can feel as a patient and all the energy demanded of a carer. And so it's almost like, how Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage, and somewhere my English literature teacher is cringing because I'm not quoting it properly. But Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage. And so we script these different roles for each other for our mutual growth.
And what about free will? When free will comes into play, would you say that guides and angels kind of steer us back on that path? Or what is your opinion on that?
Well, that's a great question. What I observed was that, people always ask, what about free will? If we're going to plan stuff before we get here, where does free will come in? my understanding for what I observed was that our soul plan is the framework for our coming here. And there's things called entry points and exit points. Entry point, of course, being the family into which we're born. The soul plan is who we're going to be, where we're going to live, what our talents or challenges might be. But there is always free will within that. For example, relationships. My husband, John, and I have been together for, 33 years. But I believe that we agreed to meet. We designed at a soul level to meet for our paths to cross in life. But it remained our free will whether we were going to have a summer romance, a little fling, or just be passing ships, or actually build a life together. So we designed to meet, but from there it was completely free will. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, yes. Well, do you think a soul contract can be broken?
Absolutely. A soul contract is an agreement between two souls for mutual growth and evolution in the spiritual realm. An example of that is, I shared earlier that I chose to be child-free, but I ended up having 2 biological children because I was an egg donor to dear friends, 2 different couples who are each struggling with infertility. Now, I believe, and I say this respectfully because I'm not out to convert anyone, but I believe that my 2 friends designed at a soul level to experience infertility. And when you think about it, being a mother is a very primal urge, right? It's primal. It's not something we need to sign up for. We just know it's innate for most women that they want to be a mother. So what that told me from a soul perspective, or that suggested from a soul perspective, was that they decided on a very, very advanced life theme to want to be mothers, but then to face various medical obstacles to that goal. I believe that I made a soul contract with each of them before we came to say, I will cross your path, we will get to know each other, we'll be good friends and have all the trust that good friendship brings. And I will offer, or if you will ask, I will agree to be your egg donor. But when we all arrived here, we retained free will to go, you know what, I love you and I'll support you in any way I can, but I'm not sure that I could be an egg donor. I retained free will. And free will is at the crux of everything on the other side and the crux of everything here from a soul perspective. We always have multiple choices on any given day as to how we interact with others or make decisions.
I agree. As far as exit points, because I believe we have, I believe that if a soul chooses to exit early, that there's really nothing we can do to change that. Although I believe, for instance, my son, he had an exit point when he was 14, where he almost passed away when he got really sick. And I've been told from mediums, that more than one medium, that that he had that exit point. One said when he was 14, the other one said 5 years earlier, and he passed at 19. So what do you feel about the exit points? And I know that you say that there's numerous. Do you want to briefly touch on your feeling on that?
Happily, Carol. I would love to talk about exit points. If you don't mind, though, could I just backstep one moment to talk about entry points? Is that okay? Thank you. Well, of course, when we design our soul plan, obviously that doesn't happen in a vacuum. We have to be born and literally have an entry point to this world and to this human experience. So our entry point, of course, is our family, our mother, but it involves a lot more than that, even though she is at the core. So our entry point is we're designing our family, who our parents will be, whether our father will be known to us or maybe more peripheral in our life or absent altogether. We'll be choosing and agreeing with, using soul contracts, agreeing with others to be our siblings and our birth order that we work out as well. So our entry point is our parents, any siblings, our birth order, our culture. We choose our educational level. We choose any talents and challenges. We choose the presence or absence of a faith. We choose our socioeconomic group. So we're really really designing where we parachute into our human experience. But of course, everything is in divine and perfect order, and everything is in divine and perfect balance. So when we choose our entry point, it's only natural that we would choose our exit point as well. What I observed, and certainly what many other spiritual authors and mediums have also discussed, is this exit point whereby we choose, well, okay, how are we going to do this? And it seems to be, for some reason, about half a dozen different scenarios that we choose as potential exit points. And Carol, thank you for sharing that. But Tyler had chosen something at 14 and 5 years before that. Let me clarify, just in case soul plans are new to someone joining us, that we don't uniformly plan out our exit points every 5 years or every 10 years or anything like that. What I saw was that Bobby, his potential exit points were, one involved a tricycle accident, not on the road, but with someone backing out from a driveway, not seeing him. Another was a childhood illness. And so there are different ways where the soul basically plants in these different potential points to say, you know what, maybe it is time now. And I want to suggest this very respectfully. I ask only that you consider in anything that we're talking about today, what if? What if my child planned that exit point? What if I knew the possibility of that? What would it mean for the magnificence of my soul that I agreed to be open to the possibility that my child would leave me far sooner than myself, my partner, or my family would ever obviously want to lose them? And again, I guess that's why I come back to Jane, to Bobby's mother, is that she knew he was planning these different exit points, which would do nothing but cause her heartache. And his decisions would come at tremendous emotional cost to her. And the fact that she still agreed to that, it just resonates years later. I can't. So please believe me when I say, when I talk with mothers whose children have transitioned, I know that I am in the presence of an advanced soul, because even the possibility, as Jane said in Bobby's soul plan session, I will agree to be his mother, because doing so gives him the chance to come at all. And so I don't know of a higher spiritual calling. I just don't. I genuinely take my hats off to you.
Well, I believe that our kids are all, these kids that have left too soon are all highly evolved, and
Yes.
they come here to teach us. I think they come here to teach us, and then once their work is done, then that's when they're ready to go home. And the biggest growth comes from some of these horrible tragedies.
Absolutely,
Would you
Carol.
say that you talk with conviction about the soul plan? Did you come to believe this after that visit from Bobby, or had you already been? I know for me, I was on a mission to get answers. So I found my proof after Tyler passed. But what set you on your journey to learn about this, or to question it? Was it that visit from Bobby?
Well, that was certainly the main event of my life in terms of spiritual experiences. I had already been open to the idea of rebirth from the Hindu side of the family. I always half joke, that I was raised to believe in guardian angels. From the time I was introduced to solid food, I was introduced to angels. It was just always part of it. So I fully agree that I was always open to that. And then I've been doing, spiritual reading for 30 years or so. I had an interest in my former life as a social worker and child protection worker, that I was always open to spiritual experiences. So I did a lot of reading. And in fact, there was one part in my outer body experience, if that's the right word, where when I looked over to Bobby and I saw him, with the others sitting around in a circle of people sitting down to watch his soul plan, my reaction was, wait a minute, I've read about this. So how do I know that I'm not imagining it? And Bobby very gently chided me and said, when I read about it, he said, you read not to discover, but to remember. And that made a lot of sense to me, because I feel like what I was being shown was something I've seen many times in my own time on the other side. And so I was just remembering something. So I have always been open to that. May I just add something, Carol, about exit points, please? I fully respect that one soul's exit point never happens in isolation. It is always the pivot point for someone else all around us. Of course, our family are the most for that, the most impacted. And so when we go, it always sparks, or has the potential to spark, free will, the potential to spark enormous growth in the lives of others around us. And I fully respect that you have started a group through your experience of Tyler transitioning, Elizabeth starting this group, writing books, sharing your experiences. With respect, you both had free will to do neither of that. When any parent, a mother or father, experiences this kind of loss, and I say this with no judgment, there's 100 ways to cope or not cope. Exactly. Someone might be soothed by alcohol. Someone might experiment with recreational drugs just to numb that pain. So what I'm saying is we all have different opportunities, and one's not better or worse. It's just what we are doing to cope at the time.
Exactly. And there's never any judgment. We always say everybody should, they have the right to handle their situation. I just have found that helping others gives me a purpose. It helps me heal. And, I always have said, I want my son to be proud of me. And I also, if I did choose to just, not try to see the gifts, not try to get the knowledge, then my situation isn't going to change. It's not like it's not going to bring him physically back here. And so I feel like if I'm going to live in this world, I want to find that joy, and I want to help others, because there's no greater fulfillment than having somebody say, well, gosh, you gave me some hope. I think I could take a step forward. Now I have a question here from a woman. Her name is Kim. We just see how you can answer this. She said, I did a soul life regression, and I also lost a child in a previous life. What could this possibly mean, or what lesson should be learned? I don't wish to lose another child in any other life, knowing the unbearable heartache. What would you say to that?
Oh, Kim, thank you for sharing that. I fully respect. Well, first off, I would never assume how you feel in your journey of loss. But what you're bringing up, it sounds like, is that you've experienced loss here in this current lifetime and in a previous lifetime. Two things come to mind. One is that you have been working through a life theme of loss. And now that may sound obvious, but there are just so many ways to cope with that. And I'm sure being part of this group is a great support for you. The fact that you have repeated it, you might be thinking, wait a minute, is this some lesson that I just have to learn over and over again? Not at all. You may have been a mother in your previous life or in this life, where you came simply in service to your child. Soul contracts, as I mentioned, are these agreements between souls, but they're never quite 50-50, if that makes sense. You may have decided in one or both lives to come mainly in service to your child, who was planning an exit point, or several exit points, but one which involved leaving much sooner than you ever would have wanted. And so what that tells me is that perhaps you came in service to that child, but into all the others affected by your child's passing. So it's often said that we will experience different angles of one particular lesson. It doesn't mean, Kim, that you will continue to experience this. Please don't feel that. And nor does it mean that even if you chose a life theme, it doesn't mean you have to wrestle with it until your own last breath on this earth. You have, I'm sure, made a lot of progress and gone on a very individual and personal journey about your loss. This might help. At the end of my experience with Bobby, the little boy, he showed me a past life of my own. And I believe it was my most recent past life before coming here. I was shown a situation where my husband and I were very, very poor. We had a large brood of children, and we were never quite sure how we were ever going to feed them from day to day. And I remember grinding wheat for bread, and life was very much a struggle. With my children, I was shown 3 children, 3 different babies I had all lost to the consumption, which is tuberculosis. And I vowed that this time I would not lose my child. I was shown a scene where I was going through a market. I was very poor, but I was trying to barter for herbs and vegetables that would make a broth that I was certain in that lifetime would save my children. Nothing worked, and I lost my 3 children to tuberculosis. And I remember seeing the blood on my tunic. Fast forward in this past life regression, I was a very old woman, and I was on my deathbed, and I was very angry. And I felt that I still felt resentment, that I felt in some way in that lifetime that holding on to my anger and resentment was somehow honoring my children. In that time, I passed over and I went back to the other side, and I said, no more. No more. I will not lose any more children. I will not go through this heartache again. And I said, in my next few lifetimes, I will not be a mother again. I cannot take this loss. And my guides and my angels agreed very lovingly that I would not experience that again. So please don't feel that any future choices to come will mean that you have to grapple with this, that there is far more nuance and layers and free will involved. I hope that helps, Kim.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Alicia. And I do know that we will all understand, we will understand. My son has told me that I can hear him. I can't hear other kids, but I can hear him. And I've had it validated with other mediums. I'll understand. He has said, Mom, I promise this will all make sense. So I know that will be the case for all of us. For all of us, we'll eventually understand this bigger picture. So there's also myths around soul plans. Did you want to touch on that some?
Thank you. I guess the main part, the most important myth as I see it around soul plans is, well, wait a minute. If I designed my soul plan and the people I was born to and the people I would meet and marry or whatever, then if anything bad happens to me, does that mean I planned it and I deserve it? And please let me say, if you forget everything else I've said today, please remember, no one plans to be abused. No one plans, and certainly no one deserves that. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of nuance on the other side. And when we can choose our life themes, there might be the possibility of abuse. That doesn't mean we deserve it. For example, if I was working on feelings of power versus powerlessness, the dichotomy, then I might choose to meet and marry or meet and be with a man who is perhaps coming here to deal with impulse control and anger management. So we might meet, we might decide to get together or marry, and with the best intentions, he might decide, okay, I'm going to work on impulse control and anger management. Maybe he makes progress with that, or maybe he doesn't, and maybe, to paint things in primary colors, maybe he becomes someone who abuses me. Let me say that it's not for him to say, well, you know what? I planned to be a potential abuser. I planned to have poor impulse control. Life themes are always designed to be overcome, not to be indulged. But we get here and we're human and different things happen. So I might choose powerlessness versus power. Imagine that I'm coming here to work on emotional independence. I want to find out my own worth, my own worth. If I recognized my own worth and what I have to give to the world, what would that mean? I could choose an entry point. I could choose a family of complete cheerleaders who praise my every move, which sounds like kind of a nice life, but I'm not sure about the growth involved. But what about with choosing emotional independence? What if I chose a mother who was a very good woman, but who was critical of my life choices? That maybe I don't have children, or that I don't take my husband's last name, or any other things that are important to her culturally and generationally. I would have a chance. If she would criticize my life decisions, I would be gifted a chance. I would either crumble and acquiesce and say, okay, I agree with your summation of me, or I can rise above it and say, I love you, but I don't agree with that assessment, and I'm not going to accept that label. So we actually design relationships not for the suffering they entail, but for the emotional growth they afford. So I would ask each of us in the next few days, when you have a bit of quiet time, and maybe you're just alone in the car, go through a little checklist in your mind of your most important relationships. And I'll also ask you to consider the relationships that have caused you the most pain in your life, the most heartache. What if that person was playing a role for your mutual spiritual growth? People say to me, look, why consider? What's the benefit of considering a soul plan? Why look at life this way? I think it can be as simple and as potent as this. When we look at our lives and our relationships through the prism of soul planning, it moves us from victimhood, where things are happening to us, to the role of a designer or architect or engineer of our own life, where we have set certain things in motion that we get to decide whether or not we grow from. So we're very powerful souls, all of us.
Wow, I agree with that 100%. I always say that. I always say by embracing that soul plan, it took me out of that victim mode, because otherwise you feel like, well, why me? I mean, I'm a great mom. My kids are everything. Why me? And you become this victim. Like, why did this horrible tragedy, and I'm so unlucky? But when you look at it from a soul contract, and you think this is for my growth, I helped to design this. It took me out of that victim mode, because then I thought, okay, let me try to learn about this, and again, we all have our own journeys, and we all believe what we want to believe. But I feel like I've had my proof from my son in different signs, and that his exit was, there was nothing I could have done to change that outcome, even if I had said no to the motorcycle. I believe something else would have happened, because we let him ride a motorcycle, let him go to MMI. And at first I was loaded with guilt, but I think when you realize that, hey, there's nothing that could have changed this, because this was he finished what he was here to do. This was the exit point he chose. And I think it makes it easier. At least it did for me. So
I'm glad to hear that, Carol. And let me say too that it is it's entirely natural that anyone going through a child transitioning and through that utter heartbreak would naturally say, why me? And I would never want to rush through anyone through that period. That's a normal, healthy, natural reaction in grief. And I always just say to people, sit with that for as long as it serves you. No one can tell you that we know that grief is not linear. We cannot put it on a timetable. You will take steps forward and then steps back, and so it goes. So I would just say to people, sit with that until it no longer serves you, and then put it aside, just like a child puts aside a toy that they have outgrown. And please let me add the obvious, that I respect the grief eventually softens to something, is what people explain it to me, but I respect that it's always there. I'm not I hope I'm not being clumsy with that, but just, go through those feelings. Don't rush it. Don't rush it. Don't allow others to rush it in any way that you want to express that. One thing, if I might add, I respect, a lot of us grew up in a faith-based home, others with no faith-based references at all, and I fully respect that. People often say, look, what's the difference, between up there, whether you call it the afterlife, heaven, whatever, and down here? From what I saw, the afterlife is where love exists unopposed. It is a world of absolutes. Down here is the world of duality, hot and cold, good and bad, love and hate. And so people say, why would we come down here at all? It's because the afterlife is the theory, and down here is the practice. For example, I could run around saying, I'm a kind person, I'm a kind person, I'm a good person. But until I actually have the practice of showing kindness to someone else or feeling kindness in someone else, it's just theory. Imagine for a moment that you want to be a doctor. You go to the finest medical school there is. You know everything there is to know about the human body. You understand it at a granular cellular level. So you know all the theory. But on a practical level, you have never met a patient. You have never poked and prodded one and taken their blood pressure. You've never wheeled a patient into surgery to cut them open. Your experience with only on theory, you're not going to be the healer you could be. It's the theory and the practice that come together. And people naturally say, I would never plan this. I would never agree to this heartache. And, I respect it's not for me to tell someone else how to feel. I would only say that in the context of the other side, in the context of eternity, coming here for 80 or 90 years as a human, coming from far shorter time with many of her children, it goes in the blink of an eye. It goes in the blink of an eye. And so we know that we're going to be home before we know it. We also make our soul plans amid incomparable love and support of the other side, with our loved ones, with our guides, with our angels. And it's almost a feeling, and I don't want to be flippant about this, but it's almost a feeling of bring it on. I want to pack my life with so much human experience because I'm going to evolve at a soul level for it. And when I go back, I will share that experience with my soul group, and all our vibration will rise as a result of that. So I say very respectfully, without wishing a moment of heartache on any of you, you will see on every level, multiple spiritual levels, that your experience is helping people here, but will also help others there as well with the insights that you will take back. I hope that's come across all right.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. Mark Pitstick had always said that. And that was one of the first things he said at one of the very first meetings I went to. He said, when we're on the other side, it is, in comparison to eternity, it's this quick. And he said, it's kind of like when you go to the gym, the harder the workout, the bigger the growth. So when we're on that other side, we're saying, let's get down there and we know it's nothing, because in our eyes, when we're there, we understand everything, like my Tyler has said to me. And I think we come down here for growth. And I know for a fact I have grown. I mean, I didn't believe in anything before, even though I grew up with a religious background. I didn't believe in anything until this happened, and it has cracked me open. So there's a lot of gifts that our kids have given us, and I like to embrace them, because that is what we have. It's like, if we don't embrace them, it still, again, doesn't change our circumstances. So let's look at that, as Elizabeth always called it, collateral beauty from that movie.
Collateral beauty.
That's collateral
wonderful.
beauty. The fact that we aren't afraid of death, that we can't wait to see our kids. And yet we know we are here and we have work to do. If we're here, we're not finished. So
very much
anyway,
beautifully said.
Alicia, So what would you take from this in kind of concluding, like, how has this changed your point of view in life? I mean, family, marriage, everything.
Sure, it really was a life transforming experience for me. On a day-to-day level, I have a little sign. I'm talking to you from my study, and I have a little sign saying life review. And if you're not familiar with the term, a life review is all the thousands of documented cases about near-death experiences, whether someone was black, white, rich, poor, educated or not, pivotally religious or not, they all describe the same thing, that when they passed in whatever manner, they had this joyous reunion with their family members, even pets, which was obviously an incredible experience. But after that, they all described a sort of life review. And we've all heard the cliche, "My life flashed before me." Well, actually, that's a lot of what they described is a life review. So I have a little sign on my desk that says life review. And it means if I feel like a bad mood coming on and I want to be short with someone, I'll think, do I want to relive this in my life review? Because I believe in my life review, I will see, in the presence of my angels and guides around me, I say this very respectfully because I know that a lot of major religions preach a judgment day. And if that resonates for you, then I respect that. But what I believe is personally that there is not a judgment day about someone ruling down on whether we're good enough. We look at our life review and we decide for ourselves our spiritual growth. So I fully expect, ladies, I fully expect to see all the times that I lost my temper, or I was a cow, or I said something I really wished I could stuff the words back in again. I will see the times that I hurt people, the times that my anger got me in trouble, just the negatives, if you like. But by divine and perfect balance, I will also see the times that I was kind, that I was patient, that I was loving. And from that, I will weigh it up to think, okay, or maybe I've moved a little bit further this time. And I'll look at that life review. And for example, I might decide in the life review, maybe I was too attached to material things. I was all about the Lamborghini and the designer clothes and the external indicators of success. Maybe next time I might choose maybe to be born into a modest circumstance where I don't have access to those things, not through punishment, not through wagging the finger, but as an example to learn from a different circumstance. So I do think about the life review every day, and I really wish that people would go easier on themselves if they ever go through a divorce, and that the people around them would be less judgmental. What I saw was that Bobby's parents came together for the experience of welcoming, for their growth, but for the experience of welcoming their children as well. That marriage was designed to come together, and it happens to be they're still together, but it could easily have been designed that, you know what, after X years, we'll come to an intersection in our marriage and we'll be faced with a decision. Does one of us have the courage to call time on a relationship that is no longer serving us, or will they stay out of obligation, or for the children, or for religion, or for family pressure? So a lot of marriages are designed to not last, and I say that with respect. And yet we have tremendous judgment around that. And also friendship. You know, the saying, someone will come into our life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. And we can all look back on our life and think, oh, look, we had a great adolescence together, or she was my college roommate. And I think as women, sometimes we hold on to friendships that no longer serve us through a sense of obligation. Whereas I think men could be a little bit more cut and dried about it and just wish each other well and, let it pass. So friendships are more understanding. I was once ghosted and I still don't understand why, maybe 10 or 15 years ago. And I carried that. And then I realized, wait a minute, we designed to come together. Whatever those lessons were have played out. Just wish each other well. So it's just a lighter way to look at it, I think.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And I love what you talked about. I always think about my life review too, when I'm I'm interacting. And I remember a speaker who had said how one thing you say when she had a near-death experience, it was actually Dr. Mary Neal, who is at our last conference,
yeah.
who will be at our next conference. She said how she saw how one thing she did that seemed so small and insignificant, she saw this it just multiply, and how it affected so many people, and it was really interesting. So I try to keep that in mind. But we're all human, and I don't always succeed, but I'm trying. So
oh my goodness, and that makes us human, right? That we've come to this amazing experience on earth with all these different challenges on our time and our efforts and our peace of mind.
That's
and we're
right.
just these actors in a play. And I feel like if we can look at these circumstances, it can take the sting out of it to say, if this was scripted, I get to choose how this ends. I get to choose how I react. And I love what you said, Dr. Neal. It's a wonderful book. One moment that we don't think is actually that important sets in motion a range of things. We show someone a kindness, they in turn show someone else kindness or understanding, and that changes. It's a butterfly effect, right? That
Absolutely.
changes every time. So I think we're all a lot more powerful than perhaps we regard in how we go about our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. Are our contribution and our gift to the world.
Well, thank you so much, Alicia. We really, really appreciate having you on here. I'd love to have people unmute and say goodbye and thank you. And it will be recorded, so people get to hear this for as long as we have that YouTube channel, which will probably be for a very, very, very long time.
Well, I appreciate the chance very much, Carol. Thank you, and my thanks to Lynn and Elizabeth as well.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Alicia. And have a
Thanks,
wonderful,
really enjoyed it.
and a wonderful morning in Perth.
Sorry, yes, I forgot to say greetings from Perth, Australia. So there you are.
And thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.